it's Brittney Cooper. I'm back with Discovering Darklin, Chapter 2, which is from the point of view of Giselle. It took a little longer to get back on here than I thought it would, so let's get started. Giselle watched Tadding back Carlin up against the wall. Allie stood a little ways behind Tadding like she was his backup. She stood there with a grin on her face and seemed to be enjoying herself. She always enjoyed mayhem. It seemed to distract her from everything else. Giselle just rolled her eyes again and watched the scene unfold. "What the hell?" roared Tadding. He smacked the wall above Carlin's bald head, rattling the photographs on the walls. "Were you seriously going to hit Nolanay, a woman? You came into my place of business and act like this." "I was just hanging out with my girl and that drunken moron." "Psst, Giselle." Giselle turned to see Jack waving her over. She might as well get him a drink before he becomes a real bother. There were real problems at the moment. Jack harping on about needing another ale was not something she wanted to deal with. She took another ale over to Jack and set it down in front of him. Jack looked down at the 2 full glasses of ale in front of him and then back up at Giselle, staring down at him. "That is not what I wanted." "Then what do you want?" "Just a question." Giselle was annoyed. Why does Allie seem to be enjoying this? Like, really enjoying this? It's kind of morbid. Giselle was startled at the question. She was struggling to control her demeanor and response. She wondered what he knew. Did he know something? Something about Allie. She schooled her features into the calm, pleasant expression she usually had. "Allie has some issues. It's entertaining when this kind of stuff happens. Look at everyone else in here. They're all watching what she's going to do. Watching what's going on, too." Jack looked around the bar at everyone. Giselle wasn't sure if he bought her explanation of Allie's behavior. Her temper and fascination with violence and mayhem had gotten them into some trouble over the years. Thank the stars for Tadding keeping her safe. "I don't care what Nolanay did. You did not act like an ass in here. I thought you had more respect for me than that." Tadding still had Carlin up against the wall and was shaking his finger in his face. Carlin almost looked scared. Almost. They were about the same height and build, so it would be anyone's guess who would win in a fight. Tadding probably would at the moment because he was definitely angrier. Behavior like Carlin's simply wasn't tolerated in Tadding's. Even Allie's antics were kept from going too far by Tadding. "Look at my shirt," exclaimed Tadding. "That drunken ass knocked my girl's drink all over me." He stared Tadding directly in the face. His face was as red as his shirt. "It's a damn shirt. Calm the fuck down. This doesn't warrant your behavior." Tadding's face color was starting to match Carlin's shirt, but Carlin's face turned even redder still. "No buts," said Tadding. He pointed his finger at Carlin. "Carlin, don't move." Tadding stomped to the register and removed some gemstones. He noticeably exhaled and dumped them on the bar top. He picked up over half of the little white gems and told Carlin to come to the bar. "Here." Tadding held out his hand to Carlin. He took the packets and counted them. 8? "What about the rest?" asked Carlin, looking at the remaining gemstones on the bar top. Carlin looked livid. "They go to the girls for putting up with your behavior," Tadding said in a calmer tone. His face was no longer red. "Your shirt is paid for. Now get out," Tadding said in the same calm tone and pointed to the front door. Carlin walked back towards the chair. "I was going to have another drink." Tadding leaned over the bar top and caught him by the arm before he could sit down. "Out. Now." His tone wasn't as calm anymore. Carlin scowled as he pocketed the packets and left, slamming the front door. It was wild that Tadding flipped out on Carlin like that, since they had been friends as long as Giselle had been working at Tadding's. But Carlin was acting like an ass. That behavior couldn't be tolerated. If the local sheriffs ever got called into Tadding's, there would be hell to pay. So any altercations were always dealt with by Tadding or the girls, with occasional assistance from 1 or 2 of the patrons. Thalmet was always helpful to have around. Riordan and Luca had good intentions and meant well, but they could only help so much since they were small guys, as all Dana guys were. Tadding went back to the bar and laid the 4 packets on the bar top. "Are you 2 okay?" "We can take care of ourselves," snapped Allie. She picked up the packets and tossed 2 to the other bartender, who caught them both mid-air. Giselle just nodded. Give Falmette a drink on the house and one to Riordan when he comes in again, said Tatting. He was only addressing Giselle. Allie had already begun walking towards the back room. The excitement was over. She would most likely spend the remainder of the night in the back room cleaning. It was messy since Tatting had had a large meeting back there a couple days ago, and she had been cleaning ever since. Allie always left the customers for Giselle to deal with, which was fine with Giselle. It usually meant much less trouble and less broken body parts. Got it, boss, Giselle said, watching Allie retreating to the back room. Tatting strode down the hallway towards his office. He probably had a meeting to finish. Almost as an afterthought, halfway to the back room door, Allie looked over her shoulder and shouted back at Giselle, I'm only going to finish cleaning the back room. I only got half done before the excitement, said Allie. Can you deal with this? She waved her hand out to indicate the only 2 remaining customers. She gave Allie a very, very annoyed look while biting back a smart retort. Go clean! Allie disappeared through the back room door. Allie never wanted to bartend unless there was a fight or something just as interesting going on, which most days was non-existent. She even started issues when she was very, very bored. Tonight's altercation was ultimately started by Allie when she pissed Nolanay off, and Nolanay stood up too fast and fell. If Allie had not done that, Nolanay probably would have just slept until closing and not caused any problems until then. Giselle really wished her sister were more like her. Giselle, another ale here, called Jack. She hesitated and mentally changed her response to something not as mean. She wanted to tell him to shut the fuck up and go away, but she settled on, are you trying to pickle yourself? She was beginning to get very annoyed with Jack tonight. She wasn't really sure why, but it was just a feeling. Tonight he seemed to be extra annoying and was acting a little odd. He was constantly checking the front door, getting really quiet, and studying the news on the current outbreak in between his annoying comments. He was even asking questions about Allie, which he never did. He just watched her when she made her occasional appearances, probably expecting entertainment. Allie rarely disappointed in that regard. The entire time Jack was in Tatting's, he was irritating, which was mostly in good fun. However, tonight he was unsettling her between the questions and the quiet. Maybe she was just getting anxious Druitt wasn't going to show tonight. She hadn't seen him in a while because he had been off-planet visiting friends, and she was beginning to miss him. It's only my 6th ale, said Jack. 7th, she retorted. Jack started shaking his head. She could see him forming the numbers with his mouth as he counted in his head. I guess you're right. Then he went back to watching the news, which was still showing outbreak coverage. He got serious all of a sudden. You think the medicine will arrive any earlier than it usually does? She looked up at the hollow screen and exhaled a breath she had not realized she had been holding. The scenes that played on the hollow screen were devastating. Sick rooms and lines of dead laid out wrapped in cloth. The warehouse-sized sick rooms were worse than the lines of dead. There were lines of cots or just filthy blankets on the ground filled with an unmoving resident of Laetera, covered in pus-filled boils that would never go away. In the corner of the screen, she could see a small arm reach over to the next cot as the child shook the body. The only response the child received was an arm falling limply off the cot. It was just too awful to watch. Tearing her eyes away from the hollow screen, she looked down and breathed deeply. Probably not, she finally answered after a few deep breaths. Jack really was acting out of character tonight. He was attempting to be his usual irksome self, but not completely pulling it off. Something was bothering him. Giselle poured another ale for Jack, who took it without taking his eyes off the hollow screen. She saw Falmette waving out of the corner of her eye. He was ready for his free drink, so she poured his usual blue water drink and poured a shot for herself and carried both over to where Falmette sat. She set Falmette's drink down in front of him next to his empty glass. Exciting night, huh? Falmette said as he slid 3 clear gemstones across the bar top to Giselle. These are for you. She nodded and scooped up the gemstones and pocketed them. She took her shot and set it down next to Falmette's empty glass. There have been plenty of fights in here over the years, she said, laughing a little, and leaned her side against the bar top to semi-face him and crossed her arms. We can handle it. Falmette chuckled. He had a cute laugh for such a big guy. I know. I was here last month when Allie broke Luca's arm when he tried to pick a fight with Jack. It was a sight to see. He chuckled and took a drink. She smiled. Falmouth was very easy to talk to. His head wasn't in the stars. At least Allie didn't start that fight, she said. True, but she as sure as shit finished it. He laughed again, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Luca is just a little guy. I think she may have had a bit of trouble with Carlin without Hattie's help. He laughed and nodded. True, but that girl could definitely cause some damage if she put her mind to it. That's what I'm worried about. She reached up and touched her necklace. The stone was cool, as it always was against her fair skin. The thin leather strap familiar against the back of her neck that held the stone. She slid her nail into the slot in the bottom of the stone to clear out any dust that had accumulated there. It had been years since she had used the stone. She hoped it still worked. I'm going to go after this drink, Falmouth said. He looked as if he had said this several times in order to get her attention. Yes, okay, have a good night. Giselle picked up the empty glass and turned away from Falmouth and glanced at the broadcast on the holoscreen. The reporter was still speaking of the current outbreak on Leoterra and the timeline of when the injections were going to be delivered from the Kalis system to curb the spread of the outbreak. Giselle frowned at the holoscreen because she knew the injections would arrive on Leoterra too late. Thousands would die first. That was the way the outbreaks were engineered. It sickened her. The outbreaks were engineered by the Kalis system. No one could prove it, but it was clearly obvious to those who paid attention. There was hardly any surviving history prior to the landing of the humans in the galaxy, but in any remaining records, there was absolutely no mention of this disease, and there had only been outbreaks for roughly the last 100 years, ever since the current King Commander of the humans came to power. Unfortunately, very few live into old age because of disease and the regulated executions of the government. Old age varied by species, but usually anyone over 70 years old. Reaching old age was an achievement. Every 3 to 15 years, there had been an outbreak of this sickness where these fluid-filled bumps formed on the skin and eventually covered the entire body, causing severe fatigue and pain. Eventually, the body just gave out. Once the sickness was contracted, there was no cure. Only a few species were not affected by the disease, which were mostly underwater species. The only form of prevention was the injections the humans from the Kalis system provided. Humans just didn't seem too bright to Giselle. There had to be better ways to find the rebels. They provided a prevention method to a disease that humans could not catch, but always way too late, resulting in thousands dying. The humans were looking for the rebellion. Giselle wasn't sure if humans were trying to get the rebels to surrender to stop the outbreaks. Maybe the humans were just guessing where the rebels were currently hiding, and that was where the next outbreak occurred. The locations of the outbreaks seemed pretty random to her. 3 years ago, it was Salisi in the Laxisa system. 6 years before that, it was Gririx in the Runarix system. 3 years before that, Balon in the Gemino system. 3 years before that, Valenti in the Lyschista system. Then 15 years prior to that was the last outbreak in the Casmino system on Avakion. Never had there been an outbreak in the Kalis system, where the humans primarily resided. The door to Tadding's opened, and a guy walked in, or what would have been considered male. The Shandlite was tall, unnaturally skinny, and had pale purple skin. He looked around and focused his attention on Jack. He moved slowly but gracefully and took the seat next to Jack. Giselle was a little surprised. Shandlites were not usual customers at Tadding's. Giselle had only ever seen a couple before and never actually spoke to one. Their names were difficult to pronounce, and their manner was just very foreign to her. It was said that they could read minds, but she had never seen any evidence of it. She went over and asked what the Shandlite wanted to drink. He raised his entirely white eyes to Giselle. Salad juice, he said. A chill ran through her. Those eyes were super creepy. They looked like a dead person's eyes, reminding her of the countless dead on the outbreak broadcasts. We don't have salad juice, Giselle told the Shandlite, keeping her expression pleasant and her voice steady. Salad juice was highly toxic to most species, so Tadding refused to carry it. Ale, then, said the Shandlite in his deep monotone voice. Another ale for me, too, said Jack. He drank like a damn squid, fish, or something like that. She couldn't make any sense of that human saying since she had no idea what a squid or fish was. Some, like Jack, could drink and drink and drink and drink, and it didn't really affect them. Others could not. Giselle smiled to herself as she thought of Allie drinking. Allie could only handle 2 ales before she was so fuzzy-headed she couldn't concentrate. Even Tadding gave her a hard time about being a bartender and not being able to drink. However, it's not like Allie had chosen to be a bartender. Giselle could drink both of them under the table. It just didn't seem to affect her. She can only recall being truly intoxicated a few times, and it happened after they arrived at Tadding's many years ago. Then she had been in mourning. Now the liquor just took the edge off. As Giselle poured the ales and heard pieces of the whispered conversation Jack and the Shanlight were having, she poured a whiskey mix shot for herself, too. Tonight's events were getting to her. Allie's behavior was going to draw attention to Tadding's. Thank the stars that Carlin would never betray Tadding, even though he can be an ass on occasion. He had seen firsthand what is at stake. Is she okay? Asked Jack. He had turned slightly towards his companion so as not to be overheard. Do you have? Asked the Shanlight. Giselle had slightly turned her head, tucked her dark hair behind her rounded ear in an attempt to hear their conversation. Good night. See you tomorrow. Falmouth had gotten up to leave. Giselle waved her long-nailed hand at him. As he passed by Jack and his companion, they stopped talking altogether and resumed once Falmouth had left out the front door, which Giselle thought was a little weird. She downed her shot and took a deep breath. She took Jack and his friend their glasses of ale. They stopped talking when she approached. Again, very weird. Jack paid for both drinks. The Shanlight seemed to expect it, as he had not reached for his gem pouch. Jack, putting his drawstring pouch back into his jacket pocket, pulled out a white envelope. Giselle barely noticed. She poured another whiskey shot for herself and drained it in one gulp. When was Druitt going to show up? Was he going to show up? She wondered if his off-planet trip had been his way of ending things. She didn't have to worry for very long. Shortly after Falmouth left, the front door opened again. Cases of liquor appeared at the door, carried by a big, muscled Ogren. He brought them over and set them on the bar top. Hey there, sexy. He looked around the boxes and drank in Giselle, his eyes roaming from top to bottom. His big, dark eyes were her favorite feature. Giselle smiled and almost giggled. Druitt, it's about time. I thought you forgot about me. That's impossible. He tapped the cases next to him. Want to take these? In a minute. Come with me. She crooked a finger towards him. He followed her towards the back room. Halfway to the door, she called over her shoulder to the last 2 remaining patrons in the bar. Be good, Jack. Be right back. He didn't respond or even seem to have heard her. They entered the back room where extra stools and tables were kept. It was rarely used unless Tadding had a meeting too big for everyone to fit in his office. Giselle looked for her sister and found Allie was throwing rags into a bucket. The rags were gray from cleaning, and the water in the bucket was almost black. Her pants and shirt sleeves were rolled up, and it was fairly obvious she had just gotten up from scrubbing the floor, evidenced by the wet spots on the knees of her pants. She looked up from her rag collection. Oh, come on! I'm almost done. She knew Giselle wanted her to vacate the room. Her anger from earlier had not completely dissipated. Giselle still had no idea what she was so angry about this time anyways. Just go watch Jack for a few minutes. He has a Shanlight out there. Her big brown eyes widened a little. That seemed to pique her interest. A Shanlight? What the hell is one of those doing here? It really was uncommon to see them outside their home planet of Shanlight. They were very secretive. Fine, don't you dare make a mess, she said, looking at the both of them. She threw the rest of the rags she was holding into the bucket. Nasty black water slopped over the side onto the floor. She's messy, said Druitt, and she told us not to make a mess. She just doesn't want to clean up after us. She doesn't mind cleaning up after herself. She had followed Allie to the door and locked it, then turned toward him and smiled. He smiled back, looking down at her. The top of Giselle's head only came to his chin. He reached down and picked her up. She wrapped her legs around him, and his hands grabbed her ass to pull her towards him. His lips met hers with the familiar warmth. As the kiss deepened, he reached one hand up into her hair. His other hand was still on her ass, holding her tight to him. She could feel his grip tighten on her ass as he shifted towards one of the extra stools kept in the back room. He sat down with Giselle straddling his lap. Her jacket slid off her shoulders and slumped to the floor. She leaned into him, pulling him to her by the back of his neck. He gasped. "Eager, are we?" he said against her mouth. "I missed you," she gasped as she pulled back. She smiled at him, and his smile faltered. "What?" He held her on his lap, but looked away around the room. "Don't you ever want to talk or anything? Every time I see you, you practically attack me." Her face fell. "You never seemed to have a problem with this before. Why the change?" She attempted to disentangle herself from him, but he held tight to her. "Well, we've been seeing each other for over a year, and I don't know much about you. I've only seen you outside of Padding's twice, which we stayed in at my place. I've never even been to your place. When I was visiting friends, they were asking me about this amazing girl I talk about." Giselle tensed. "What did you tell them?" Her voice slightly strained. "I don't know anything." She relaxed a little, but she was getting pissed. Most guys would kill for a purely physical relationship. "What is it you want to know?" "I don't know," he hesitated. "What do you like to do in your free time?" "This." She pulled him back towards her. As their lips met, he seemed to relax and give in to what Giselle wanted. He ran his hands up and down her back, then attempted to slide them under her top. She removed her hands from around his neck and peeled her top off to expose her lacy bra. Next, she moved to the buttons of his pants, causing him to shiver as she touched him. She undid the buttons and slid off his lap, landing on her feet. He stood up, causing his pants to slide down. "Come here," he said, and crooked a finger at her. She smiled. A short time later, pounding on the back room door interrupted the floor cuddling session. "Damn it," said Giselle, "where are my pants?" She put on her clothes and yelled through the door, "What do you want?" Allie's voice came through the door loud and clear. She was unsurprisingly annoyed. "If you and Loverboy are done, please get your ass back out here." Giselle groaned. "Fine, give me a minute." She looked over at Druitt still laying stretched out on the floor where they had just had their fun. "Time to get up." He looked pleased with himself. He stood up, making their makeshift blanket, his jacket, fall to the floor. Giselle just stared at all the muscles and manhood and sighed that she had to go back to work. Tadding had no idea that she did this or not that he let on. Giselle assumed that as long as the customers didn't see anything and security wasn't compromised, it wasn't a big deal. Allie kept Giselle's escapades with the liquor delivery guy to herself. Not that she seemed to care much anyways. Allie didn't have much interest in any extracurricular activities that didn't involve a knife. "I have to get back out there. Come out when you're dressed," she said as she threw his pants to him. He smiled. She noticed it didn't completely reach his eyes. "It's about damn time," Allie whispered to Giselle as she walked past her. Giselle took her position up back behind the bar. Her sister couldn't get out from behind the bar fast enough. Jack and his friend were still the only customers. The cases of liquor were still sitting on the bar top. What the hell was Allie doing out here? She could have put these away. She dragged them down 2 at a time and stored them in the storage closet behind the bar. She was glad there were only 6 cases today. She was tired from her extracurricular activities. A few minutes later, Druitt came out from the back room and walked up to the bar. "You want a drink?" Giselle asked. A smile had crept back onto her face despite trying to restrain herself. She can't let the customers catch on to what she was doing. He shook his head. "No," he said. "You know your friend is a bit of a bitch." "My friend?" Giselle was momentarily confused. "Oh, you mean Allie." He hesitated. "Yeah? What did she do?" "She threatened to throw a bar stool at me." "Sounds like her." She didn't look happy. "Oh, chill out. She's just like that. Ignore her." She glanced at Jack and his friend and saw that they weren't paying any attention to her. Giselle got closer to the bar top and leaned towards him. "Quick, give me a kiss before you go." She smiled at him. He leaned over and kissed her. "I have to go." He smiled and walked out of Tadding's. Again, she noticed his smile didn't exactly reach his eyes. A rustle of a coat brought Yozel's attention back to the whispered conversation between Jack and his buddy. She saw the Shanlight stuffing something white into his overcoat pocket. How? She better be okay. My word, our business is done. Do, again? She couldn't quite make out all of their conversation. The Shanlight said all this as he had stood up to leave. Are you going to drink your ale? Asked Yozel, pointing to the full glass of ale in front of the Shanlight. In answer, he picked it up and drained the glass in one drink. He left with Yozel staring after him a little stunned. She had met one or two Shanlights in the past, and she thought that they were odd then, too. She knew Shanlights could drink ale like it was water, but she had never witnessed it before. It was a little unnerving. Those were fairly large glasses. Yozel, she looked at Jack. You okay? He had a concerned look on his face. Your friend can rival your drinking. It doesn't affect him. Some of his usual cheeky demeanor returned to his face. He smirked at her. What? He's Shanlight. Ale doesn't affect him like it does us. It's why they drink that salad juice stuff. Shanlights were such a shady bunch. She wondered why Jack would be meeting with one. Tatting would be furious if Jack had done a shady deal in his place. That would bring unwanted attention. Have you ever tried it? Yozel asked Jack. He shook his head. Why would I? I don't want to die. That rules out a few species that Jack could be. Yozel had worried that he was a human spy for Mole, but he drank too much and he was an excellent faker. Plus, if he was found out, he would be in some seriously painful trouble. Humans were not very welcome in the Casminos system since they treated everyone else like trash and didn't leave the Kalis system except for official business. Yozel discreetly looked Jack over as he drank his ale. His brown eyes, brown hair, and rounded ears didn't give anything away. Many species had those. The inability to drink the toxic drink ruled out Shanlight, Volman, and Aleo. He didn't have enough obvious muscles to be Ogren, and his fair complexion eliminated Dana and Layet. He could be Scion or Tanal, as they looked the most like humans. Jack didn't look exactly like a human, but he always wore pants and jackets, so there could be identifying marks of his species hidden under his clothes. She had only begun to suspect him recently. For the last 2 years, he had been coming into Tattings, getting hammered, being annoying, and leaving. He usually came in alone with the exception of the odd floozy. Whatever he is, Yozel knew she needed to keep a close eye on Jack. He had secrets, and Yozel had to make sure his secrets couldn't hurt her or her family. He seemed innocent enough sitting there watching the outbreak coverage, but the same was said about her and Allie, which was simply not true. Allie returned from the back room, which snapped Yozel out of her thoughts about Jack. Allie's red hair was frizzing out in odd places. Her face was flushed, and she had been sweating from cleaning. She had an angry look in her eyes, and her lips were pursed so thin they were almost non-existent. The purple lip color she always wore was barely visible. Hey, why did you threaten to throw a bar stool at Druid? She ignored her and stormed towards Tatting's office. That's the end of Chapter 2. Chapter 3, sorry, I wrote the book and I can't remember. Chapter 3 will be the point of view of Tatting, and come back next week for it. And if you can't wait till next week, the link to be able to purchase the book will be in the description below. And don't forget to subscribe so you'll be notified when the next chapter is uploaded. Thank you, and I hope you like it.